Good afternoon. My name is Meg Griffin, and we are here at the Carroll County Public Library, the Finksburg branch, and we're talking with Ann and George Horvath, who've agreed to come and talk to us about their experiences growing up in Carroll County. Welcome, Ann and George. It's good to have you. So let's start off with just telling us where you were born.
Well, when I was born, my parents lived below Finksburg on the Carroll-Baltimore County line. I was actually born in Baltimore City Hospital, but my parents lived in Finksburg.
Okay. And then did you grow up spend most of your life in Finksburg?
Yes, in the Finksburg area. As you're aware, it's a large geographic area. I didn't ever live in the town of Finksburg, but our mailing address was always Finksburg. So we lived in a number of places. My father was a laborer and tenant farmer, and so that we moved depending on where he was working.
So you got to see all different areas of the county growing up.
I was fortunate that I didn't have to change schools, but some of my siblings did, you know, as we'd move around. I started school in Gamber at the older building that is now, I believe, an apartment, and then I went to the Mechanicsville School, and from there to the Westminster High School.
And do you remember as a child, what did you usually do? How did you spend your time in the county growing up? I mean, was there one certain thing that you liked to do more than others? You ride the bike or horses?
Well, my sister and I played with her dolls as small children. You know, my father would have a car to go to work, so we didn't go places except back and forth to school. And as we got older, we had bicycles, and we'd go around to places that we could get to on the bicycles, depending on where we were living. My sister got into horses, but I'm not a horse person.
Do you remember any specific buildings, you know, stores, movie theaters, or anything in the area that has changed or actually is very similar to as it was when you were growing up?
Well, we didn't. We usually went to Reisterstown for groceries and shopping. Rarely went to Westminster. Rarely went to the movies. So I remember going to the movies in Reisterstown. I don't remember ever going to the movies in Westminster. I remember going to a Ford store in Gamber with my father. That was where the television was. And the men would congregate at Ford's store to watch boxing. So as a child, I was a real boxing aficionado. I knew all the fighters, and because we would go there with my father, and I liked to watch the boxing and watch the people watch the boxing.
And Ford's store, where was that?
It was right on the corner of 91 and 32. That building has recently been demolished, and there's a gas station there now, right?
Gas station.
And a convenience store, I think. Yeah. But it was a meeting place then, you know, when I was a child.
Yeah, I would think that having places like that, it probably kept the community kind of tight, because you know, you did have reasons to get out and kind of congregate together. And what about when you were a teenager? What did you do for excitement back in your teen years? Do you remember?
We didn't do a lot of things. I worked most of my adolescence. So.
What did you do?
I worked at Lassiter's fruit and vegetable stand on 140 from the time I was like 13 to I went away to school.
Wow.
So I did, you know, most of the boys didn't have cars. You know, they would, so we didn't go very many places. And it was during the time when Liberty Dam was being constructed, so there were lots of places that you could ride that were not really on the roads if somebody had a car, but most of our friends did not have cars. so we hung around. We lived at Bozel's Dairy Farm when I was a teenager, and that was down here on 140 where Gertzel's Academy is today. And so, you know, it was a long road, and we had, you know, bicycles and the things that we would go around to people's houses that were close by.
And so I guess there was a lot more home visiting than nowadays,
Right.
the way the kids
Sitting on the
pretty
front
much-
porch,
Yeah.
playing ball, things like that.
And then you went away to college?
I went to nursing school, and I went to Baltimore City to the Franklin Square School of Nursing. It was in the city then, and so that was my very first experience with Baltimore City, or living in the city and away from the country, which was interesting, a very different environment. But I went to nursing school, and then when I graduated from nursing school, I lived on Liberty Heights Avenue for a while. It was then in the city too. I had a small apartment, and I worked at Franklin Square and worked a number of other places in the city during my professional career.
And then how long were you gone before you came back?
Well, my family was always in Carroll County, so I never really felt that I had totally left, because on Sundays or holidays or whenever I was off from work, I would come up to Carroll County to see make sure, you know, to do things for my parents or with my family. So, you know, I always had that connection to the county, even though I wasn't living in the county.
I see. So being on the kind of both being your heart in Carroll County, but not physically always in Carroll County, you probably were able to really see the changes that were happening, you know, more objectively than many of us who just lived here. What did you notice anything anything struck you as major changes that seemed to happen pretty quickly here?
Well, let's see, Route 140 was a significant change. I remember it as a teenager. It wasn't a lot of traffic. It was some traffic, but it was supposed to be a non-accessible highway. And that certainly was an adjustment as I continued to come to Carroll County to see family. That was obviously not going to be the commitment. It was rapidly changing and being built up, and Westminster was sort of the center of activity, and it rapidly became outside of Westminster. Many of the roads, even Route 91 from Finksburg to Gamber changed dramatically, and if you didn't go on those roads on a regular basis, you could come back to Carroll County and find things that had always been familiar were very unfamiliar.
Do you remember anything specifically having that happen to you? Any specific buildings or areas that particularly jumps out in your mind?
Well, I know that I remember Cold Saturday Hill in particular changed dramatically. That was an area that I remember traveling with my parents on many times as a child, and then suddenly as an adult you come through there and it's so very, very different. So that was one of the places that I specifically remember.
It was changing. Now, did you get married in the county here?
Well, George and I got married in 1977, and we moved back to Carroll County. Then we purchased a house in the Eldersburg area, and we've lived in Carroll County since.
And what brought you back?
Well, we were looking for a house in an area that was accessible to both our jobs, and that's we found something that we liked, and it was close enough to Liberty Road that he could get back and forth to his state job, and I could get back to the job, back and forth to where I was working without increasing our travel time a lot.
Okay, and how did you meet?
We met at an event, just casually.
Ah,
Yeah.
just one of those chance meetings,
Yeah.
and it
was a
turned into
chance
fate.
meet- Yes, started talking to one another, and that's.
Yeah, well, do you remember any kind of carnivals or festivals that went on here?
I remember going to Reese Carnival, in particular, and Arcadia Carnival as a child. We would often be able to go to those.
And was it a big deal back then, a carnival coming to town?
It was something that wasn't too expensive, and it wasn't that far away, and we could do. Arcadia was kind of the best one because it was bigger and it was further from home, so you kind of look forward to it. And it was the last one usually of the season. But Reese was another one that we would often go to.
Well, what did you like most and least about growing up here in the county?
That's difficult. I like the rural atmosphere. I like, the openness compared to the city, and I like the quiet. But I enjoyed the city with its cultural opportunities.
Yeah.
And on the farm, you always have flies and things like that. When we went to the city, those problems didn't exist.
So as a country girl, you were
Yeah.
pretty surprised.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. Once you got used to the noise, it was, it's like there are no flies and there are no some of the other problems that you encounter. You didn't have to worry about the animals being killed and things like that you do on a farm.
Yeah. So it seems like they, having experienced both
Right.
both lifestyles, that sounds like it was a good thing for you to be able to see both
There were
ways.
a lot more conveniences in the city than, you could get places without owning a car, and
Yeah.
in the country you didn't go very far unless you had
Yeah.
your own transportation.
Well, what do you miss most about Carroll County as it used to be? Is there anything?
I think the things that I missed most is seeing some of the historical places being lost. There is, we lose so many of them that without any fanfare or any obvious planning or concern, and that always disturbs me a bit.
It's like the Horner store in
Yeah.
Finksburg.
Finksburg itself is certainly, the little town of Finksburg is certainly a very at-risk community today because nobody's restoring most of those homes. They're all being allowed to, they're all being neglected, or there's very little restoration going on. There's no county effort to really save Finksburg, and yet Finksburg has a very interesting history.
Well, hopefully that'll be changing, as more people become aware of the historical impact of all these buildings and work to save them. Let's see, if you were to describe what's best about Carroll County, if someone came to you and said, I'm considering moving to Carroll County, what would you say? What would be the thing that comes to mind most that would probably convince them that this is where they would want to live?
Well, I think the educational system is very important to most people that come here. It would depend on the age of the person and what they were looking for. It is reasonably close to Baltimore and Washington and Annapolis. I see that as a real asset. I think that people like to live here, and most people are glad to travel out of Carroll County to find employment. They, most people would rather not have their employment right in their backyard, and that's
So that's a plus. They can
that's-
leave their jobs behind. And
They can leave they can drive home and leave the job behind. Is very important to most people. So I think it would depend on the individual and what they were looking for.
I see. Well, is there any final stories or little anecdotes you'd like to share with us?
Well, that's my mother's family were in this area, in the Finksburg area, since the early 1800s.
Oh.
They lived on a farm called Sorensi, and multiple generations lived there. Unfortunately, that house was removed because of Liberty Dam watershed. The area has never been flooded, but that house, the site of that house, has never been flooded. But the house was taken down because of that project.
I see.
At the time my parents met, my father was living at another estate which was destroyed because of Liberty Dam, which was called the Elms, and my father was living there with his family in a tenant house, and that's how my parents kind of met.
So you've got deep roots here in Carroll County.
My father's family were originally from Tennessee. They migrated up through from Tennessee through Virginia and ended up in Maryland. And at one point, my grandfather was a tenant farmer at the Elms. So, that's kind of an important connection to me. Other little things that I remember that probably are not part of life today, and lots of other people remember them too. But I remember when I lived at Bosel's Dairy Farm that we would often ride on the open truck to the stockyards in Westminster. And your hair would be standing out straight, but by the time you got home. But that, nobody rides on open trucks like that today. And we stood up on the railings and rode all the way to Westminster. And lots of little things like that have changed. There were no seat belts, so when you dated, you got to sit close to your date, sit in the middle. I remember I didn't have pasteurized milk until I was, except at school, until I was an adult. Because I lived on a dairy farm, or we went to the neighbors to get milk. One of my earliest memories is riding on my father's shoulders to go. At that point, we lived on Deer Park and 91, and I remember going over to the farm across the way to get milk. And
did it taste different? I've
It
never
was
had unpasteurized milk.
It doesn't taste different, but it wasn't homogenized either. So the cream all came to the top. And it got a skim on it, which was very distasteful to children. So those are little things that I thought about that are very different today, because most people don't really don't use unprocessed milk.
Yeah, I think it may even be a law, isn't it nowadays?
It's a law
You
now.
can't
It
even
is.
buy it. So
Yeah, you
that's
can't
kind of a
buy it,
shame.
and because there are diseases associated with it, but obviously.
You're alive, so somehow must not be all that bad.
Well, that's interesting because my grandfather, my father's father, apparently did develop undulant fever from contaminated milk.
Really?
Yeah.
Huh.
It was listed as a contributing cause to his death. I don't know with today's diagnostics if that would be in reality, would really be true, but that was at that time thought to be the cause of his death. So people were very sensitive to having very healthy livestock because you didn't want anyone to be getting sick.
Yeah.
So, any other things that you can think of, George?
What struck you when you moved here? I mean,
Well, I moved here when we got married, but I worked on acquiring land for 795, which changed Carroll County. For 5 years, we acquired land, and after 5 years, influence of the Carroll County changed because people could come up to Carroll County faster and more people came in.
Right, right. So that was what you see as what has had the biggest impact
Yeah.
on the county as far as causing change.
Yes, the influence of the highway and people coming and going, and
Do you think that'll continue, that trend of more and more people coming in?
I think I think the county is a considered bedroom community, that the people come here and live here and go out to different counties to work, city, and
Yeah. So I guess until some kind of big industry comes, that's what it'll continue. Well, it's been wonderful talking to you. I really enjoyed hearing all about those early days of Carroll County. And thank you for joining us.
Thank you.